So first off, I wanted to talk about presentation. Your presentation image. See, that's game. Here, up and down.
We didn't have game last term.
Oh. Up and down is game. Still no focus. Scrolly is your depth. So for presentation, remember that you are demonstrating where baby is laying in result to maternal long axis. Okay, so your presentation image should always be in sagittal, maternal long axis, right? Because that's you going along with mommy. Blue lights, my gosh. You want to get the cervix, because the other portion of presentation is not only where is baby laying in relation to maternal long axis, but what portion of baby is closest to my exit? Cervix. Cervix is how baby gets from in to out, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm wanting to show sagittal, maternal long axis, what is closest to that?
Your breech. Butt.
We are breech currently, yes. My butt is currently closest to cervix. So we are in the breech presentation. Now, sometimes, like particularly on mommies that are further along, you can't actually see cervix anymore, just because baby is so big, and you get a lot of that like bone shadowing either from femur or from head usually, because toward later term babies tend to like to know to flip around. So in cases where you can't actually see the cervix, you're wanting to go, it's like a U thing. You are going to go low on mommy's pelvis, midline on mommy's pelvis, and just take a picture of whatever you can see. Okay. Sometimes if mommy's bladder is full, demonstrating whatever anatomy right next to the bladder is kind of like helpful landmark for you and for the doctor, just because everybody knows where the bladder is. So bladder lays pretty much right on top of cervix at that point. So whatever is like right there, you just kind of take that. As far as the phantom goes, you're wanting your image. Isn't that so nice? They gave her bowel shadow too. How kind.
That is disrespectful.
Oh, hey, look, she has an Ebopian cyst too. Wow, look at that. All right, as far as your like protocol picture goes, we're wanting to see, since this can show you vaginal canal. This thing is so cool. We want vag, cervix. We want baby as long as we can open it. Okay. So that is our presentation picture. Okay, we're showing cervix, we're showing what's next to cervix, we're opening up baby as best as we can. Okay. So then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was placenta. So placenta is, how do you?
Oh, you're zooming with the scroll.
With the scrolly, yeah.
Okay.
So placenta, honestly, this is kind of what placentas look like. See how it's like a nice, smooth, echogenic blob thing? That's my placenta. So placenta position is something that's important when we're talking about terms of like delivery management. We're wanting to make sure that it's not laying over the top of the cervix. When you're doing a real study, you are wanting to show upper and lower margins of the placenta. Lower, upper margin. Demonstrating that they are far away from the cervix. Or like if it's close to the cervix, showing how close to the cervix, okay? And then from there, we would talk about where. Is it anterior? Is it posterior? Is it more towards the lower uterine segment? Is it kind of in the middle? Is it more fundal? Is it on the right of the uterus? Is it on the left of the uterus? Where are we talking? Okay. Most of the time, you're going to see things as anterior, posterior, or fundal. It's an interesting mix of things. This particular placenta is going to be anterior, right? Because anterior is top, posterior is bottom. Generally, this is something that's pretty easy to determine. When you plop down the throat, if you can see the placenta up at the top, that will be what we call anterior. If you plop down the throat and you see placenta on the bottom, that's going to be a posterior placenta. Okay? And then as far as, this one is kind of like anterior fundalish. Because here's the fundus of my uterus, and you see how we have like placenta kind of touching the fundus. If I wanted to get more descriptive about my placental position, I would say anterior fundal. If it was more like here, it would be like the middle of the uterus, right? So I would say anterior mid. If my placenta was down here, now we're talking about something a little more low-lying. So I'm going to say kind of a low-lying placenta. Now I'm going to measure how far away are we? Are we covering the cervix? Are we some kind of previa? Or are we just kind of low? How low? What is my distance between my inferior placental margin and the cervix if we're closer? Okay. And then as far as like your right and left placentas, if you go transverse, you will literally see the placenta be on the right or be on the left. So that's how you know like if it's a right-left placenta. Okay. This one is still anterior, so it's in the middle, anteriorly. Your fundal placentas, like when you go up to the fundus, will still wrap around the top of the uterus there. Okay. We'll talk about grades later, probably when you can see something that's not perfect. We'll talk about grades of the placenta. This one is perfect, so he would technically be grade 0 or 1. There are more interesting options though. And then for the head, did I say, do we have enough space to do? So remember my head circumference is taken at the level of the BPD and the cavum septum pellucidum. I'm only zooming because you guys are far away. You don't actually have to zoom on your head. So here's my thalamus, that nice little heart-shaped doohickey. That little anechoic box right in front of it is my cavum septum pellucidum. This is where we're taking our head circumference and biparietal diameter. Okay? So I hit the spacebar to freeze. I'm not that great at left-handed clicking, so we're gonna measure. Comes up with a couple different options here. This particular one is just gonna be caliper, because I'm gonna start with my BPD. You are going straight across. Woohoo! Okay, you have to set the caliper. You're going straight across widest point. Okay? You wouldn't want to measure here. That's a little too far forward. You don't want to measure way back here. A little too far back. It's kind of like in the middle. You're measuring from the outer edge of one bone to the inner edge of the next. And you can see that skin line, how that is not the same as the cranial bone. You see how those are two different textures or colors, really? One is slightly brighter. The bone is brighter. Okay?
So we measure the bright part.
The outer of one bright part to the inner of the other bright part.
That one. Yes. You can take your BPD and head circumference on the same image, if it pleases you so. So I'm kind of going with like OFD here, and then we're all going to be surprised about what happens next. Okay. All right. So you place your first ones, and then I'm just like sliding, and it's moving with me. Oh, can I like rotate through?
Is there a measurement on the measurement setting? There was boxes that you can put the boxes and move each one.
That's what I'm thinking. Unless it's gonna let me just grab. It is not gonna let me grab. Whoa! Push it! Go back!
Press whatever you pressed again.
I don't know how to press these parts.
Loading what?
So don't hit escape.
Loading pathology. What is the pathology?
We have cleft lip and gastroschisis.
Yeah, it says up there.
I see it.
Oh, there you go.
I think there's only like two.
Alright,
pathologies.
so
It's a
I guess
pectus and
just
a
try not to
ventral
screw up your measurement.
She said gastroschisis.
Copper,
Oh yeah, gastroschisis. And then the tracheomegaly.
Alright, very good.
You can't see the box. So can't see. I don't know now, but you couldn't in Boston.
Circumference, so line here to here. Alright, now if I wanted to move this, can I move this? See, it looks like
Were those boxes? How were you able to change it?
yeah, we're not letting me.
That's so weird.
Try your best to get it right the first time. Alright, so there's your head circumference and your BPD, same level. Okay, so that's what you're practicing today, is getting this image. Okay? And then the last thing is fluid. So your fluid is anechoic, yeah? On a real patient, you're going to put color on to prove that there is no fetal parts or cord in the way of your image, or like in the way of your fluid, okay? The way that we do fluid is you're going to go right up a quadrant, you're going to go all the way out, come back in, until you start to see fluid. And you're gonna measure it. Anterior to posterior, straight up and down, not cutting through any fetal parts. Your image would be labeled right upper quadrant. Okay? And then you're gonna do the same thing on the next side. Sliding in till we see okay. Fluid. Do this part of it because it'll be the upper portion. This is cervix, which will be lower portion typically. Okay. That would be your left upper
So
quadrant.
like in between the head and whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah, like this part of it. Oops. Lower quadrant, we're gonna do the same thing, measuring the lower portion. Lower quadrant, same thing, measuring just like in the lower portion of things.
So we're doing like that 4 pocket thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You're fine.
Questions? Oh, the other thing that's important about your fluid is that you're staying perpendicular to the table. So like the way that mommy is laying. Because if I go here and I angle up, I can get quite a pocket versus what happens if I stay flat with her.
What part of the fluid are you supposed to
So if you stay
measuring?
flat with her, what would you measure there? Just the section underneath the baby, or that back
I would
end
probably go
butt
with
part?
whatever is longest.
That butt
Maybe
part.
this one. I feel like that one's a little bit bigger. Although this one will be easier to measure. Yeah.
So you just measure till the baby from the.
You're just measuring the black part.
Okay.
Don't cut through baby.
But if you can cut through baby and because they're not being seen, or even if they're seen, you know, I mean, if it's like, you know how like like in between the neck and the little arms, there was like a pocket.
That's too high up for that. You're wanting to stick to whichever lower piece you're on.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because otherwise you can end up measuring the same pocket twice and you can overestimate your fluid. So you want to stick to, and you also don't want to go too far midline because now you're no longer
That's
in a
what I was
quadrant.
talking about. Like, freeze it really quick.
You're not in a quadrant
Like,
anymore.
Well, maybe not that exact picture, but like you know how like before, like you had like in between the head and the little lens.
Yeah, I would measure down here.
So you measure the whole thing. That's what I was talking. Okay,
So that would be
you do
lower,
that.
and then if I wanted upper, it would be, I would scoop.
Okay. So if you can't see the little baby portions and you can cut through the baby's like neck, that's not there.
So you just measure from the biggest point.
Yeah.
So I'm upper because I can see my upper margin here. I'll measure there. For my lower, I should be able to see like cervix portion here, so I can measure down here. Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of, ish.
Mhm.
It'll be much more obvious when you're on a fetus that's larger. Okay? Is this the only one that's
I think you finished this one. Probably restart it though.
They have the laptop locked up, so I don't know.